So hello, everyone. I can just see that people are starting to filter through. So I'm going to kick things off slowly and hopefully people will be able to join during this introduction stage. So I'll first start off with a good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are in the world. I myself am in a very grey and wet London, so I'm hoping you're coming from brighter, warmer countries at the moment. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is actually our third webinar now, the Essential Laravel Developer Skills for Successful End-to-End Project Delivery series. For any of you newbies, I'm Dan. I'm your host for this series of webinars. If you haven't had a chance to check out our previous webinars in this series, please don't worry. These are up on YouTube. So after our session today, I'll send out an email and this will have a link to the YouTube playlist and you can catch up with them there. We actually had a really great webinar last month from our new business director, Tom, who was talking about the different ways that developers can help support and even elevate the sales and pitching process. And we're going to be building that on a bit more today and actually going a little bit further with our Chief Delivery Officer, Sylvain, who you might remember from our first webinar. We're taking you through the world of strategy, why strategy matters, how to interpret and challenge stakeholder needs. So it's a really, really great talk. Just before I pass on to them, though, I've got a few introductory and house rule slides to go through, and hopefully this will just give a chance for more people to join before we get into the main bulk of today. So for those of you who are new, welcome to Cyberduck. We're a digital transformation agency, and we're also Laravel's first official UK accredited partner. And I guess if you were to ask us why we do what we do, well, we have a real passion about making the internet and websites more accessible, user-friendly, and served by better technology such as Laravel. And to achieve this, well, we work very closely with our clients and partners to redesign their websites, digital products and services through the lens of UX, SEO, and DevOps, and really trying to drive to achieve this accessibility, user-friendly experience. And you can see across the bottom a few of the different clients we've worked with, from NHS, Bosch, Sport England, worked with Cadbury's, Commonwealth, some really fantastic clients there. They have great stories. Actually, you can find out more about them on our website as well in our case studies. And that then brings us on to this series of webinars that we've started. So over the last 18 plus years, we've been building up experience and knowledge and our own processes, which we're now looking to share with the wider world, and particularly with developers who are looking to grow and elevate their skills outside of pure development. So what does this look like? Well, every month we're going to be running a webinar that's going to be looking at a different stage of the project lifecycle. As I said already, we spoke last month about pitching and the sales process and how developers can get more involved there. Today is going to be focused on strategy. And then going forward, we have talks around UX, accessibility, QA, and much more. If you're not able to make a session, don't worry. All of these webinars are being recorded. As I said already, they'll be uploaded into a YouTube playlist, and we make sure that everyone who's registered for this full series always gets the link in their inbox. We will also, when relevant, be sharing some additional material with you. So this might be an article or a white paper where relevant to the topic itself. And then that brings us back onto today. So we have about 40 minutes or so booked out for today's session. I think the talk itself is going to last around 20, 25 minutes. And any time after that, we'll have 4 questions you might have for Sylv. We can also stick around for a little bit longer if we have lots of questions coming through. As I said already, we are recording this webinar today. So if you do have to drop off early, don't worry. Early next week, we'll send out an email with a link to this. And if you do want to ask a question for Sylv, the best way to do this is using the Q&A function. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A button. If you click that, your Q&A window will pop up. You can also reach us out on social. So at the end of today's session, I'll show you our different handles for LinkedIn and Twitter. But otherwise, during the webinar, if you do want to put out a tweet for anything, please use the hashtag Laraduck, and we can always take a look at that, maybe give it a like and a retweet from our side. And then my last point before I hand on to Sylv is just around captioning. If you do require captions, automated captions are available. If they're not already turned on for you, you can switch these on via the transcript button located at the bottom of your screen. And as we all know, automated captions are good, but they're not perfect. So we do make sure that our on-demand version of the webinar will be provided with manually edited captions as well. And that's it from me for now. So I'm going to say a big hello to Sylvain, and please take it away.
Thanks, Dan, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you, and I can't wait to share some of our stories. And how really to maximize your understanding of stakeholder needs and the importance of strategy on digital projects. I want to start by sharing some potential memories with some of you. I don't know if you ever had that feeling or that experience on any of your digital projects where you spend months building a piece of software or a web application and realize that you had built the wrong thing. Might not have been kind of the wrong software at the end of the day, but that a lot of the modules or a lot of the features didn't work the way they were supposed to at the end of the project. And that when you reach that phase, that maybe the client got angry because they didn't realize what they were getting. Maybe there was not enough show and tells along the way, or a misunderstanding around the specification. And with this big reveal at the end, it was not what they were expecting, and they were not really happy. Or even if they were happy, might have realized at the last minute that there was a slew of change requests coming when they finally got their hand on the piece of software that you're building for the clients. And they can see the real version in action now in the browser and start to play with it and get a feel for the features. They realize that there's some things missing. Maybe it doesn't solve all of their main pain points. And they send you like a week before launch, dozens and dozens of change requests. Some that are quite small and small bugs that might be fixed, but others that will require a lot of rework. And you, on the software engineer side, the other kind of the receiving end of that feedback, you feel like you've wasted weeks of work, maybe again, building the wrong according to the wrong specification, or maybe even after launch, you realize when the clients ask additional feature, that it will require full refactoring of a core module because you didn't know about it, and it's a big change, and the client maybe never mentioned it before. So I think we've all been there. Everyone can remember some of the stories. We certainly have in the 18 years of existence at Cyberduck. We had one or two projects that didn't go so smoothly. That's normal and expected, but we obviously learned a lot of lessons from that. Because at the end of the day, it's not good for business. We cannot run the risk of building the wrong thing or wasting client budgets. And again, whether you're an individual contractor or working in a large agency or even for internal teams on a product, it's a lot of wastage, and might not get paid for the work that you've delivered if it's not what they wanted, and it might damage the overall relationship. So it's just not good for business. And how do we avoid all of this? Like there's this famous memes, obviously, on the internet. I think everyone has seen it, where the way it was envisaged at the beginning and sold is not how it's been communicating along the project delivery, and you're building something, or you're billing for something that's much more complex or over-engineered, and at the end of the day, the client wanted something quite simple. So what is the solution to all of that? And again, from our 18 years of experience, we've identified that it is the importance of a strategy phase, really. And that's what we're here to talk about today. And at a high level, really, the strategy phase needs to define the why behind any projects, really. Why are we building or rebuilding these things? Need to understand the main reason for someone commissioning that project. And then you need to understand the who are we building this application or this new portal or this app for. You need to understand the different persona group and who's going to interact with the tool. And then you need to start planning the how are we going to build these things, not just the technology, but also the team, the processes, the methods, and have a high level plan at the beginning. And obviously some of the elements that we're going to cover today in detail around those 3 points, they might need to be adjusted, whether it's a greenfield project, so are you building something from scratch that never existed and it's a brand new product, or are you taking over maybe an existing application? That's something we do quite a lot at Cyberduck, where clients come to us to rescue their projects where they've had incumbent providers that either didn't manage the platform very well or didn't manage the technical debt, and now their application is a complete standstill. and they can build up on their roadmap. So we come in and rescue projects. So the same questions apply to both types of projects, but obviously there'll be some nuances, whether there's an existing application or something that you're starting from scratch. So I'll try to highlight a few of those during the presentation, but feel free to ask questions at the end as well. And if you think about a strategy, it can be made at different levels, like in whether it's a small, like in a team, or even a kind of global corporation. There's different types of strategy, starting from the boardroom at the top, the corporate vision behind the company, and even if it's a product-based business, what is the business, what is the big vision? Then second level is at the product. So from the product management team or the CMOs, marketing, inspiration, what is the product strategy? And then you think about building it and delivering on the technology and the technical side. There's obviously some strategy at that level as well. And as we've seen in the previous episodes of this series, it is very dangerous when those three things are completely disconnected, when there is miscommunication, misunderstanding, and it just gets worse and worse over time if you let it unchecked. And that's why we were advocating in the main reason for this series to share that knowledge, and specifically starting from the technology side and software engineering and kind of everyone working in digital, being involved at the earlier stages of the projects and higher up the chain there, where you're able to bring your skills, your expertise, and potentially influence some of the decision at the corporate level and definitely the product strategy. Because if you, again, feed in better requirement and a better brief, we'll always have better output and better outcomes. So if we explore those three things, the why, as I said, you need to understand the corporate goals. What is the long-term vision of the company? What does success look like? Where do they want to be in 6 months, in 2 years, 5 years? And it might be hard to define that at the beginning of the project, but always going to be useful at least to give a sense of direction to the project team, to the marketing team, to the product team, and the technology teams. And then you need to understand the why around the markets, which market you're operating within, what does the competitor landscape looks like, what are the different innovation, and what are the needs that we're trying to solve with this solution. And then, as I mentioned, the product vision is very important, not just the list of the key features, but how does this product helps answer a need from the market and fulfill the business requirements that comes from those corporate goals. So everything is like a funnel that drives and the product vision and the why behind everything. That would be it's a must-have, really. It's like the main thing that will motivate the team to wake up every day and collaborate on these things for months or years at a time. Then we need to consider the who. So obviously understanding all the end users, that's kind of user-centered design is baked in Cyberduck's DNA, and everything on the user experience. And here it's not necessarily just the customers that might be paying for a product, but now more and more digital tools and platform involve other types of users. Could be your suppliers, your partners, or an example from, for example, a work that we do with the Bosch. We're managing the web ecosystem and the main website for home users to select their boilers, but actually almost, I would say, as big, if not bigger part of this digital ecosystem are all the features related to the installers, the accredited plumbers and installers from Bosch who need to interact with that platform around booking appointment with the end users, around the rewards program, registering their guarantees. There's a lot of features for installers that are not customers, but are a key audience of the product we're managing. And then you also need to think about your internal team or the staff. It's not just a shiny front end for the customers or the end users. You also need to work for the content editors or the team who are gonna moderate the content or populate the pages or run reports of the system. And that's also a big audience that's often not necessarily neglected, but they also need to have a great experience. And then you need to think about who else, like who are the other stakeholders. One obviously usually be whoever is paying the bill, whether it's the investors, the stakeholders, the board, the person investing in building that product, that solution, and at the end your clients. That refers back to the previous points about what is the business need and the vision at the high level. And obviously they also need to be considered in terms of their understanding their measure to success. How will they be happy with the end results, even though they might not interact with the tool on a day-to-day basis. And the third pillar is the how we're going to build it. And again, it's not just about the tech. You need to first start thinking about your team. Who is going to do what in your team? What type of team do you need? Look at your existing colleagues and the team that you have in place, thinking from the strategy, the user research, the UI design, brand, marketing, analytics, front-end, back-end, QA. Like digital projects are usually multidisciplinary and can require quite a large team. So you need to understand the capacity that you have in your team, the skills, what maybe potentially upskilling some of your team members if you're kind of building something new. And then also understand the limitation of your skills or the team, that you might need to bring external partners or additional resources. And also the limitation of your environment. Might be about new regulation or a compliance requirement or a timeline from a client that they have a hard deadline to launch something, launch an MVP by a certain date. That need to be considered early on at the strategy, and it will impact the how of your delivery plan. And finally, we can start again, talking a bit about the tech, understanding the very early on the high-level architecture. And again, it needs to be kept very simple at this stage, like the Stroman diagram about the core modules, and it needs to be understood for non-technical users, because it's at this stage that you need to agree the strategy with the client and with your stakeholders. So it's nothing technical at this stage, but something that's easy to understand, that highlights the core features and that everyone can align behind. So there's an example here I've put around one of the projects we did recently. Client came to us with a requirement for a new digital platform. They wanted both a content management system as well as an e-commerce platform. And they obviously were a bit in a dilemma around, do we focus on the CMS, where there are kind of great content management system like Drupal and other headless solution, but that are not great for e-commerce, for example. There's some modules, but it's not the best in e-commerce. Or do we focus and we start from an e-commerce platform that obviously has all the features expected for e-commerce, but that don't have great content management experience or less features than a dedicated CMS? And we presented early on the two options to the client, explained the pros and cons of each, and we were allowed to make a decision based again on the longer term plan for the client, where the long-term vision was to be fully e-commerce driven, and they were happy to kind of have less CMS features for phase one, and that's where we built on an e-commerce platform. And that project was delivered successfully and aligns again with the longer-term roadmap of the business. And the main benefit of this stage is really to reduce waste, as this famous quote of measuring twice to cut only once, because the era that I don't remember what year was it, like 10 years ago, or when Mark Zuckerberg launched this move fast and break things, like let's launch as quickly as possible and try. Doesn't matter if we break things, we can iterate quickly, especially if you're working on clients' project that have fixed budget, or when it's more like a rescue project where an application is already serving thousands of customers in production. It's not really an option to break things or get it wrong. So again, we're not saying that should go against the agile principles, but we're still obviously following these principles and iterating in small chunks and delivering value very often. But the point is to spend a bit more time upfront to better scope, so measuring twice before you start cutting, and that will then save you time later during the development. So how approach them then? What are the solutions? And I'm going to present kind of five of the key highlights that we've rolled out across most of our projects, and trying to again share some of that knowledge and tips on how we do it at Cyberduck. So the first one is to really understand your client's business. So that's at the beginning of a relationship. You need to show that you care about the results. It's not just one project that you try to get in the door and quickly deliver and then move on and close a quick deal like that to make a quick buck. It's about investing in the long-term relationship, and that means that the sales cycle might be a bit longer. It's not always chargeable when you need to run a workshop to drill a bit further in the client's requirement if their brief is not clear enough. So that's something we consider when we see there is potential, and to build a relationship and show off the skills early on, where by really going deeper into the brief and understanding the client's requirements, our proposal and suggestions and project plan will be more accurate, and obviously become more likely to secure that piece of work. And more importantly, it builds trust with the client that we're really invested into it and we know what we're talking about. The second point is to, again, understand the client's business and their pain point. Even before any technical requirements are discussed, it's about this user-centered approach, about understanding the pain point of the customers, the market needs, but also the internal team. And that's where you can bring user researchers and run strategy workshop. There's a lot of exercise to highlight all of that. But again, they will bring valuable information that you can then apply in your delivery to make sure you answers that and deliver better experiences. And then again, we've mentioned that in the past, it's about challenging the brief. That's where, again, your technical mind, technical expertise can be very useful, because clients, they will want it all. They want all the features, they want everything fully automated. They want kind of the Rolls-Royce version of the digital solution, but they have the budget of a Toyota Yaris, for example. So not everything is possible, and that's where the clients needs our help as a technical leader to make recommendation and bring our expertise about understanding the core features, highlighting the trade-off, because it's not always possible to build everything in an MVP, and explain that to non-technical clients or stakeholder that might not get why it's so complicated to build something. If they come with a brief saying, look, I can do it in Excel and I change this, that happens. It's not as easy to build when you have to replicate that in the cloud as a web application with complex database structure. So that's where, again, you bring your expertise, your experience, highlight potential new trends or regulation in the industry, and all of that will help you better understand their business and build that trust. And finally, it's also to think about the overall service, because the client might ask you to just rebuild a website or build a new portal for a new service that they're launching. And yes, you can build an amazing platform, make it look amazing, shiny, but then you need to think about the back office as well. Like, how will the data get fed in? How are the editors going to populate more content? It's not just when you build it, but how does it run then after it's deployed, and what does it look like in a year or two? You need to think about all those back office processes, and that's where this notion of service design comes in. And it's something more and more that a lot of the businesses are investing into early on at the beginning of the projects to really deliver an end-to-end service that works for everyone. So highlighting a bit this notion of service design, well, it's in the name. It's a design service, the human-centered approach to designing or redesigning sometime. And you look at the organization entire ecosystem, all the interaction, all the products, all the processes, and service design needs to, again, it's a team effort. It's interdisciplinary by nature, because it goes far beyond it's not just the interface. It's not just the UI of what you see at the end, what the end user sees. It really needs to cover the entire ecosystem from the front stage that you interact with, but it's also about transforming the backstage, the back office, how the organization culture, the people, the operation, the processes, how the technical system interact. And the goal is to obviously improve and deliver brilliant user experiences, because at the end of the day, that's what makes any product successful. And by users, we mean really all the users. It could be the customers, your colleagues, the staff, the suppliers, and even your own project team, how they go through delivering that project. Obviously, service design takes the form. It's a whole discipline. There's several output from service map and customer journey and technical architecture and much more. So it is very important because it goes deeper in the organization. It impacts, as I mentioned, the whole end-to-end, from top-level culture all the way to the minute technical details and API integration between systems with everything in between. And that's what really drives digital transformation. It's not just, again, about turning a paper form into a web interface. It's much more than that to be successful in digital transformation. So again, we could spend hours talking about service design. It's a whole topic on its own. So what we've decided is to release a future episode of this series specifically about this topic. So in the next few months, we'll plan that with Daniel and really go deeper into how software engineers and technical people can contribute to this phase of the project. The second pillar of the strategy is also to define the roadmap of whatever digital product you're building. Because, as someone famous said, without a roadmap to reinforce our strategy, we have no path to navigate. And that someone is actually my colleague, David, that's a solution architect at CyberDuck, who helped me put this presentation together and has a lot of great insights from him. So I think it summarized quite well that basically that's what I was saying earlier. It's kind of guide the whole team. It's this motivation and this big picture vision that everyone can align. And then throughout, make a lot of decision about how and who and why and how we're going to do certain things. All of that will be really useful. And to define the roadmap, obviously, you need strong product ownership. And actually, we've identified or seen over the years that a lot of our clients might not have those capabilities, and either not even that role doesn't exist, or someone has been promoted, or it's someone's responsibility, but they're not really trained for it, or they don't have experience. And that's where we, as a collective, need to help, because I think actually product ownership is a team effort. The whole team owns the product, and the product owner's role is to really share that knowledge or promote that understanding to the rest of the team. And then obviously being responsible for decisions. At the end of the day, they're the one deciding the priorities of a feature, for example, or what gets built first, or what features to drop. But they need our help in a lot of cases. The second item to help you define your roadmap is also to think about future modules. Because again, client can come in and say, okay, we're building this new form to allow user to do some sort of self-service. But what is next? Like, what is the next step? Like, are they going to build additional feature for self-service of users? Or is it going to need to talk or reconcile with finance system or ERP in the backend? Or what would be the admin moderation tool? There's a lot of those little details that are usually not mentioned, forgotten from the brief. And then might have an impact later on the projects if you didn't know about. Similarly, with compliance requirement, that needs to be clarified early on in terms of, let's say, hosting specification. We've got some clients say, yeah, like I've heard you can host something on DigitalOcean for $10 a month. But then they come to us saying, oh, actually, we're going to need to run a pen test, and we need to be compliant with SOC 2 and ISO and this and that. And then obviously we need to set up a more complex infrastructure on AWS. So clarifying those requirements early on during the strategy phase and building that into your roadmap, understanding the impact that, let's say, the hosting solution will have on how you build your software, the architecture decision that you make, will help shape all those technical decisions early on about the architecture, the database diagram, and all the DevOps pipeline, for example. And then, as any roadmap and backlog, it needs to be prioritized. And even at the higher level, before you have individual user stories, you need to make sure that you're addressing the challenges in the right order. So that's where, again, the technical skills that you bring to the table, you need to kind of collaborate with your delivery manager and with the stakeholders or the clients, and understand those agile principles about iterative development and what modules needs to be built first, because there are dependencies to other system. And that's something that's, again, always evolving, like in sprints. When you run sprints, at the end of every sprint, you need to make sure that you stop and you check if you're still going in the right direction with anything you've learned in that sprint, whether it still aligns with the roadmap, and whether it's still contributing towards the long-term goal that you had set. The third pillar is to agree the right metrics. Obviously, you need to be able to understand what we need to track, like from the corporate strategy and the product KPIs. What do we need to measure? What are the metrics that we as a team as a delivery team, we will be measured against, basically, whether the product is going to be successful or not. And that can vary a lot depending on the type of projects. It could be whether it's more lead generation driven, or sales and conversion, or frequency of users returning to a portal for self-service. Could be a lot of different metrics, including some internal one as well, around your team velocity or number of issues being raised or things like that. So could be a wide range of it, but all of the one that you highlight, you also need to think about the risk associated with those and the product that you're building. And again, our ISO compliance and ISO certification accreditation helps us have this mindset where we take a risk-based approach to everything, and we document the risk. And some of them might be minor, but at least we're aware of it, the team is aware of it, and then we can, again, adjust our decision-making process based on the knowledge of those risks, and accept some and mitigate others. And then you'll need, obviously, to be defining how those metrics will be tracked, because you cannot measure what you don't track. That's, again, another famous saying. But all of that will define part of the strategy, the technical brief that you get given, or that you give to the team who's going to build it, to make sure that they have some sort of log or archive of all the interactions in the system, or whatever records needs to be saved in the database to be able to be reported on. That needs to be defined early on at the strategy phase. And then it's about really fitting that into future decision-making and building a culture around data tracking, because it's, again, everyone needs to contribute, not just the high-level conversion rate from the marketing or the product KPI from the product manager, but also some technical KPIs from the technology team, and maybe performance budget or response time and time to restore in case of an incident for DevOps team. Like, really, everyone has different level of KPIs, but everyone needs to work together, validate them throughout the project, make sure they're still accurate, because, again, that will drive the product success, the happiness of the stakeholders, and hopefully help you make better decisions to drive future investment into the digital projects you're building. Another important point is around documenting the logic. And here we're as you know, we're at the strategy phase. So before any code is written, so we're not talking about test-driven development or documenting as you write code and adding comments to your classes. It's really about documenting the business rules and the logic, where starting when you get into a new industry with a client, you might need to have a common understanding, make sure you're talking about the same languages. So having a glossary of definition, for example, of all the acronyms in the client's industry is useful, something we do on a lot of projects. And that will help share the knowledge, both between you and the clients and the stakeholders, but also for future staff who might be joining the project later and need to be onboarded quickly. So that's the first step. And then you can start moving into the kind of writing the business logic into plain English. Again, understanding the client's requirements, documenting what has been decided early on. So if in the future the client changed their mind or say, hey, there's a bug here, you can refer back saying, no, actually it's a feature that you've asked us to build that way. And turning that into that plain English version will then be able to turn into some sort of delivery plan, where You can start adding more technical details about how everything should work together. It will give you some insights about how you should structure the database, or whether you take monolithic or microservice architecture. That's where you can start highlighting the key modules and make technical decision as well for your delivery plan that will drive the build phase. Obviously, you need to consider various stakeholders. They could be different level of documentation, and that's something you need to agree early on who are we talking to, like who are those documents gonna be used to, and that's where the C4 architecture comes into play, where I don't know if any of you is familiar with it, something we've been exploring over the last few months and starting to roll out, because it's really useful to have different level of complexity depending on who you're reporting to, basically, or who you're sharing that documentation with. So in the C4 model, it starts at the high level with the context, where you design the overall module. So let's assume for like boardroom level, no technical understanding. It's just like, okay, we have users, we have a portal, we have a back office system, and then we're triggering email. So very simple, a few arrows describing what happens. Then the second level, when you're talking to your product team, like with a technical product manager, for example, or your QA team, they start understanding a bit more about the different, there's a mobile app, and there's a front end and a back end and a React app in between. And you can go into more granular details, start talking about API, how everything interconnects together, and then go deeper down another level, the third level, which is the components level, where it starts to be more around the very technical details, start talking about the different containers or controllers or models, and that will kind of serve as more like technical documentation for other developers in your team. And then the C4, the lowest level, the fourth level, is really the code level logic, which can take several kind of shapes and forms, whether it's the documentation of your API, the classes, but very kind of granular workflows or business logic that, again, needs to be documented. And that's the more complex and more time consuming to do. But again, will be useful to even sometimes share with the client. They might not be able to do it themselves, but at least they understand flow diagrams and the logic or the rules around some of the things you might be building for them. But at the end of the day, the technology strategy and all the tech behind the scene doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's about doing good work, making sure that you add value at every stage of the process, making sure you build relationship, both with the clients, the stakeholders, and your own team, because if everyone is working well and communicating openly and sharing knowledge and even sharing issues as well, and risk and concerns, and solving those together, it can only make the end product better when everyone works so well together. And at the end of the day, the reason to do good work is to be doing more in the future. Like, as I said, if you get involved in the strategy early on and you define a longer term roadmap, or you have a vision about what the product could evolve towards, it should open new opportunity in the future, where after delivering the MVP, the client wants to keep you on and do more for many years to come, or recommend you to other colleagues and other businesses that might have similar needs. And that will, again, open new opportunity, increase your reputation, and keep us busy doing some good work and make the web more accessible. So to wrap up, I'd like to open the floor to everyone, and understanding, it would be good to understand from you, how do you plan your strategy? Again, whether you're building a digital product or different services, what have you seen in that works for you, understanding the strategy, or some of the challenge you're facing around trying to communicate at different level of the value chain and different stakeholders. So looking forward to a set of Q&A. We still have some time to go through all of that then.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Sil. Thank you so much for that. Just got a couple of things to go through before we get to the Q&A. If we can hop onto the next slide. So just firstly, we have had a comment. I think the deck's come out a bit fuzzy for a few people. When we send out the recording next week, we can send a link to SlideShare as well, because there's some really great diagrams within that. That's good to kind of revisit and look at in more detail. Just also excited to announce that our next webinar in the series is going to be on the 26th of May. Got some very special planned for that, and that's all going to be around understanding the value of UX. So please do try and join that. In the meantime, we also have our white paper on our website as well, which is a great follow-up piece for this. So there's if you haven't downloaded it already, I think lots of people who have registered for the series have already downloaded it, but if you haven't, there's a QR code there. Otherwise, you can find it on our website as well. And I think now we can jump into some questions, as we do still have some time. And one I want to start with, Sylvain, is do you think this approach contributes to the rapport and trust the client has in your team?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And that's where, being more strategic as well is increasing the trust that they get from us, but also increasing the business value, because yes, obviously we have an amazing team of developers, but writing code is not the more, how can I say it? It's more difficult and more complex, or you need to get the strategy right before you can start executing and delivering code. So obviously they're both as important, and everyone needs to at every stage, everything needs to be right and to the highest standards. But having the right strategy, if you have the wrong strategy, basically you're going to build the wrong thing, and it doesn't matter how good the developers are, they get the wrong brief or the wrong specification. Even the best developer will just end up building the wrong thing. So it's definitely bringing that. And in terms of the trust from the client, I would say yes, because at the end of the day, it's their budget, it's their reputation who's on the line. They might get fired if it goes wrong and they don't deliver on their own KPIs and their own business objectives. So if they see us as a partner making recommendation to improve things or to be doing things in a more efficient manner, all of that, will make us gain their trust. So I definitely think that's important. And as I said, it's about the longer term and future business opportunity. When you reach a strategic level, you can influence other decisions, and it's a great position to be in.
Yeah, it's brilliant answer. We've got another question here from Tristan that kind of, I think, connects to this as well, which is, how do you encourage the client and team to challenge the brief without being unconstructive or that they don't want to work together?
Yeah, you have to be obviously approach it in a sensitive way. I think what works for me and for us is either highlighting or turning it into more like a question. Don't tell them saying, "Hey, this is wrong," and I would do it that way. You need to obviously be empathetic and pragmatic the way you approach that. So it's either about asking a question about, have you thought about X, Y, and Z, or like this, I would like to ask you more question about your brief, saying, I understand that you want to build NBAC, but I didn't see anywhere how you would deal with, I don't know, how do you deal with return? Let's say you're sending a product and or e-commerce platform is a product, something happens, you send it, but saying what should happen if the client wants to return it, for example, or I haven't seen in your brief how to deal with the return process. And then you can start telling them, well, actually, maybe you need to build the return process is more important than this other feature that's in your brief. And then you can help them reprioritize the modules. Again, it's before any user stories are written, but maybe in terms of the epics that you're thinking about, you can start influencing, maybe adding new one that they might have missed, or if not, it would be about sharing example. Again, it shouldn't be about your opinion, saying, hey, client, I think you're wrong, you should do it my way. It's about coming up with data or real life examples, saying on these other projects, we have seen that by doing X, Y, and Z, it turned out better because of blah, blah, blah. So that's how I would approach it. But yeah, it's a bit of communication skills, but there's always a way of turning it into a valuable insight.
Yeah, it's brilliant answer. I'm just going to finish up, I think, on one more question, which is, in your experience, when it comes to aligning business strategy with technical solutions and roadmaps, What's the most effective way of communicating this? Is it visual, verbal, written?
All of the above. All of the above. Yeah, you need all of them. You need to, depending on the audience that you're talking to, I would say the higher in the chain, like the higher in the chain of command, the more abstract it needs to be. So what works well with boardroom and investors, it's more the storytelling, like the bigger picture of this is the challenges, or this is what our clients are complaining about, and like a specific example, and then this is what we're going to do. Obviously, there's some sort of financial consideration to be made when they hold the purse, but it's about selling a story, selling the challenges that you're facing and the ROI that they're going to get. So that's usually more visual and storytelling. Then at the product level, it's more the diagram works well when you need to talk about the different workflows and something that the product manager, the quality assurance team can understand and agree upon. So that's more visual and diagrams, a bit more kind of specific, and maybe don't want to say technical diagram, but more visual and flow of controls. And then when you talk to the technology team, it's more written, I think works well, where you need to have written specification, you need to have kind of test cases and test plans, and I would say there's more written content there. So you need to master all three of them depending on who you're speaking to.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer to that. And I think we'll wrap up there. So I'm just going to say a big thank you, Sil, for your talk today. Big thank you for everyone who has joined us for this session. Just as a reminder, look out for our email next week. This will have the recording as well as the link to the deck as well. You can also see on this slide our handles for Twitter and LinkedIn, as well as our email. Please feel free to drop us a message, and look, we're always on the lookout for new ducks to join us. Do feel free to check out our site for any of our open job roles, or just drop us a line and we can start a conversation from there. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much again, and goodbye.